All right, so we're live. Hello, everyone. Hopefully you can hear us. If you can, yeah, we go. We've got some acknowledgers in the chat, so we're up and running. Welcome, everybody, to another Moriyama webinar. Today, we're looking at Azure DevOps, and specifically, we're looking at how you can deploy securely and with confidence in Azure DevOps. I'm quite excited about this webinar. I think it's seen the slides and it looks quite interesting. So before we get started, I might just take a moment to quickly remind everyone who Moriyama is. So about Moriyama, we're a Umbraco Contributing Gold partner. We're a long-time gold partner. We've got multiple MVPs, including Matt here. And we talk at various Umbraco events. We're Umbraco certified. We really know and love Umbraco. So this for us is one of the key things we do. We also use Azure DevOps on a daily basis when we're supporting Umbraco sites and other projects. And that has given us a day-to-day use experience of Azure that we'd like to share today. Share part of that today on today's webinar. And the third thing we do, or the third thing that is unique about Moriyama is we have developed some tooling that we can use to help migrate data from one environment to another, particularly from the Umbraco 7 environment to Umbraco 10 environment. And that's a data migration expertise that we have in-house. Moriyama are also part of the Cohaesus Group. We're owned by the Cohaesus Group. The Cohaesus Group is a collection of specialist agencies, each bringing their own discipline and skills to the group. We have Cohaesus, who are strategy, UI, UX experts there. We have Drupster, who focus well on Drupal. Molzano, who data analytics, SEO, CRO, specialist agency, and some others that they're part of the group as well. So that's who we are. I'd like to now introduce or hand over to our presenter for today's talk, which is Matt Hart. Matt, do you want to take over and introduce yourself and tell us about the webinar?
Sure, Warren. Yeah, thanks. So, hi everyone. Paul, yes, this is a live event, just to prove it. I can see the chat and everything. Hi everyone. So my name's Matthew Hart. A recently appointed Umbraco MVP. I'm an Azure certified engineer, so I've passed the Azure Administrator AZ-104, and I'm working on my AZ-400, which is the Microsoft DevOps Engineer Expert. I do like support and infrastructure at Moriyama. So let's get started with our talk about and explain what DevOps is. So DevOps is the union of people, processes, and products to enable continuous delivery of value to our end users. And essential DevOps practices include agile planning, continuous integration, continuous delivery, and monitoring of applications. And DevOps is a constant journey. So DevOps is always something that is always ever changing, and there's always something new that appears on the market that you would eventually have to adapt to have best practices, and we'll go over that today. So the benefits of having a DevOps culture is one, you save time by automating all the things. Remove humans, so reduce the impact of human error by taking humans out of the equation. Be reactive, so establish monitoring throughout your infrastructure to instantly be aware of outages and act on them. And focus on builder things, so just allow your dev team to focus on writing that new feature for that website, and then let the pipeline deal with the deployment and secret management. So to the talk. So how do we deploy securely and with confidence? So disclaimer here, so we are a .NET and Umbraco specialist agency. Most of the slides here will focus on these technologies. Some concepts may apply to other tech stacks if you're on PHP. We're also focusing heavily on Azure here. So strategies to deploy with confidence. What are your options? So the first thing before you start to work on your deployment strategy is actually to fix the repo first. So sometimes what I've seen is a lot of people have their secrets in their Git repo, and the first step is just to remove all those, clear them out, just have them as empty strings in your configs. And during and another step is during your build phase, don't inject secrets during your build phase. So when Azure DevOps is building your package, don't inject secrets during that phase, because eventually they get all packaged into an artifact, and then that artifact contains all the secrets that you have, so your connection strings. And once you've got through that phase of cleaning out your secrets, reset the credentials because they're still in your commit history. So consider using web apps. So Moriyama recommends, just Azure Web Apps as your first port of call for hosting. It's platform as a service. So, Microsoft does the upgrade and maintenance of your servers. Slots, take advantage of slots with Azure Web Apps to easily deploy and review a new change in a slot and then swap it in. So then you can actually just test your release before it actually hits live in a production environment. And manage your app settings. We'll get further onto this as well. In the Azure portal, in the configuration of your web app, you can manage the app settings, which would contain your secrets. So let's do a demo of a slot swap. So this, when I was looking at this earlier, it took a long time, but I'll sort of demo a little slot swap here. So we've got an Umbraco 10 website. And as you can see, we've got this paragraph here on our pre-prod slot. And on the live site, this is just, there's no text there. And we're just basically going to demo doing a swap in Azure and how the change will appear from our pre-prod slot to the live site. So on your Azure web app, you'll have these slots. And so you've got the main production web app, and then you've got your pre-prod slot here. So that pre-prod slot is this environment, and production is this environment. What we're going to do is we're going to swap the environment. So I'm going to pick pre-prod and our live production web app and hit swap. Now, when I was doing this before the talk, it took a long time, but hopefully it doesn't take too long, and it gives me a chance to quickly look at chat quickly. Yeah, it's so to answer your question, Nick, about the databases, in our scenario, both pre-prod and the app are using the same database. And we're not using pre-prod for that long, so we can get away with having both of them running at the same time without having to worry about the load balance sort of situation that you mentioned. But if this takes too long, we might just move on. But essentially what this is doing is it's taking the web files of this release here and making them live. But I think it's going to take a long time. Yeah, I'll move on for now, and I'll have it on my other screen so I can show you once it's done. So I'll move on. If you must use a VM for your deployments, maybe you have like a contract or a deal with a supplier, and you can get your virtual machines cheaper. You can so what I recommend is deploy to a new folder each time. So when you're using Azure DevOps to make a new release, you have DevOps create a new folder with your new release inside of it. This way, you're not deploying over an existing web root, and it also allows a fresh release each time. So any artifacts or that you removed in source control or won't accidentally remain in the web root on live. There's also looking at the blue-green approach. So with VMs, you could have two production environments. One would be the live-facing website, and then which would be the green, and then one would be the blue environment, which is not running live. And you would deploy your release to the blue environment, and then maybe with a load balancer or Azure Front Door, change or have a health probe to change what environment is production, basically. And also with a VM, you could implement the slot methodology like with Azure Web Apps. So we'll go more into that now. So with a VM, you can have the sort of the slot methodology where you would have your production IIS website maybe looking at release 195. So this is a web root with our release. And then another IIS website called pre-production or pre-prod, as we call it, with release 200, which has newer fixes and things. And the process here is that you would deploy your release, release 200 to the pre-prod site. Once you've reviewed all the changes and you're happy, stop the pre-prod site so it's no longer available, and detach any sort of file locks that the app pool might have, and then trigger what we call a promote task to then tell IIS to use that release 200. And you're essentially reviewing your release on production, but on another separate IIS website so you can review it yourself, and then swapping it into production so that it works, the code is fine and it's worked with the environment, and it sort of just gives you a bit more confidence. So quick demo of that. It's a very basic demo. So here I've got like a virtual machine running IIS. Basically, I've got my production site here, which has got release 1. The site has a bug. And then pre-prod has release 2, and this release has the fix. And all we're really doing is we're saying to production, I want you to use release 2 now. And click OK. And then we go to production, and now it's using release 2, and this release has the fix. That's essentially what we're doing, and we can get Azure DevOps to do that automatically for us during a production deployment. And our slot has successfully swapped. So you'll see in the pre-prod environment, we have the old release, and in production, we have the new release with our paragraph. So we've just successfully done a swap, and we're able to test our environment before pushing out to live. So let's move on. Consider also maybe using Docker. So Docker is a big thing now, especially with Umbraco 9 and Umbraco 10. The sort of strategy you could have with Docker is you would have your DevOps pipeline build your Docker image, send it to Azure Container Registry. These values here are your commit ID. So maybe you did a merge with all your code fixes and now have commit, for example, 1EA3BE. And as you can see, we've deployed it out to these two environments here, and we're in the process of deploying it out to the last one. This one's still using the old one. And you could have like a load balancer on the front with a health probe to basically check which ones are healthy or not. So your traffic's coming in, they have this request, and they want to, and at the same time, you want to deploy a new release. So if you have multiple environments ready to go, you can deploy to them one at a time, and the load balancer will know which ones are healthy with configured health probes. You can also do this with Azure Front Door as well. And Docker and the other benefit of using Docker is it spins up very, very fast once deployed to an environment. So let's move on. So strategies for securing your secrets. So we're getting into so we've done the confidence part of the talk, and now we're getting into strategies for securing secrets. What are your options? So the aim, I think, is to strive to go secretless. So it is possible to just have no usernames or passwords in your configs, thanks to Azure AD and managed identity. I'll sort of mention this blog post in a moment. There's basically you install a NuGet package into your .NET project, and this will be able to communicate with the managed identity set up on your resources. So a web app will have a managed identity. Your VM might have a managed identity, and those will have a role-based access control. That's what RBAC means. Permissions to your SQL database and to your blob storage, for example, if you've got your Umbraco media there. And this is all managed by your Azure AD. And you could also use key vault references in your Azure app settings. So here I'm sort of demonstrating that in your app settings, instead of actually having the secret in plain text, you can have a key vault reference. And the way you do that is you have the syntax here at Microsoft.keyvault secret URI and the URL to your secret with a secret name. And you can do this with app settings JSON as well and nested elements in your JSON. If you have like a double underscore, this will basically say inside the applications element, the instrumentation key, take this value from the key vault. And you can see the web app recognizes it as a key vault reference. So let's take a look at that. So in Azure here, you would have noticed that we've got two different messages, hello from key vault and from key vault for prod. So essentially these two values here are app settings in our app settings JSON, and they're both referencing different key vault secrets. If we go into our pre-prod environment, for example, you can see we've set the SMTP password to display as the message, basically. So if I click on that, you can see it's just, if it let me, screen's too small. You can, that's the syntax I mentioned in the chat, in this previous slide. And we also have our Moriyama, our Umbraco connection string here as well. So this is an Umbraco 10 website running in the background, so we can sort of see that as well. Find that box thing. The password correct? Yeah. So this is Umbraco, and I'll go further as well, where I'll show. I think in our, now I think I've done this, I'll double check. The app setting should be completely empty with no values set in them. Oh no, they are set. But on pre-prod, I think they're not set. I think on pre-prod they're not set, but we can still access Umbraco on that. That was a little mistake there that I forgot about. So on app settings, so these are empty here. So you can see the connection string is not set. We've got super secret password there, but it's been overwritten by our key vault value, and you can see we've got Umbraco running in the background. Just forgot to do it to the production environment. Oops. And so if I go back to the configuration again and just sort of show that in more detail. So we've got the URL here, and if I go to the key vault account, you can see our secrets are set here. So here's the prod one, and you can see the value there from key vault to prod, and so we've got our from key vault to prod shown there. And if I am to change this to a new version, we'll give it another message, maybe welcome to my webinar, if you have spelled it right. And click create. That should create the new secret, and then it should eventually show. It might be cached. I have to come back to it. So what's my webinar set there? What was it on that one? No. Might need to wait a bit for it to show that, but essentially you can have your secrets set here, and it's linked just by a link by that URL. And the benefit of this is that no one can see what the actual value is, and with Key Vault you have access policies to control who can view these secrets. So you can see I have control to all the permissions basically to see these secrets. And for example, if my colleagues try to access this, they may not be able to see any of the secrets until they have an access policy. You'll also notice that our managed identities for our web apps are here as well. So let's just look at that as well. So we talked about managed identity just previously. So if I go to the identity section, you can see I've turned on a system-wide identity for this web app here, and it's got this ID. And essentially all you do is you take the copy of this ID, and when you add your access policy, you select your principal and basically specify the GUID of that managed identity, and it will pop up, and you can add it and give it granular permissions of like get and list, for example. So this will prevent the web app from setting secrets itself or all these other permissions here. I think that's Or has it come across yet? No, it hasn't. I probably have to restart the application to do that. But let's move on. I'll restart the app. Let me just do that quickly. I'll do that now, and then reload it as I move on with the talk. So one thing to be aware of Key Vault is the costs. So you are charged for Key Vault transactions. So when the web app grabs the secret from Key Vault, it's a transaction, and I believe the Umbraco in this case will cache the secrets, as you can see. Will still cache the secrets in its environment until you restart it. But maybe you might have some business logic or something that will keep trying to ping for an update to Key Vault, and so just be aware of those transaction costs with Key Vault and your app settings. And yeah, we touched upon, Key Vault has access policies for role-based access control. But obviously, if costs are a concern, you can have the secret directly in the app setting as text, and it will be hidden. But anyone who has access to the web app can just click on it to reveal what it is. But that's the trade-off. There's another mention of secret management in Azure DevOps variables, but I don't recommend this really. So in Azure DevOps, you have in the release section, you have the option to specify variables, and you can specify which environment it goes out to. So preview is like our preview environment that we would deploy to. So it'll be like a web app called preview, and production is our production environment that will deploy to a web app called production. The reason why I don't recommend it is because it can get really messy and it can become very hard to manage. As you can see, so for example, you see the same secret name here, and they all have different values, and it's just not nicely sort of listed out in DevOps, and it just can become a management nightmare, really. And really, what I sort of like what we have, what I'll show you later on is that it's not, to me, it's not really organized, and it can get out of control quite easily. Plus, if you want to update them, you have to go through all these values and make sure they're all correct. Or when you're setting them up for the first time, you have to add them all one by one, or try and write something to add them via the API. So the DevOps stuff here is about injecting secrets in deployment. So what's the other approaches? So we can have secrets injected from Key Vault itself using like a PowerShell script during the release phase. So you would have your build artifact, which will build your application. Then you would have DevOps push it out. But before it pushes it out, in the set parameters file, so in all sort of .NET releases, you have a set parameters file. This is more for .NET Framework really than app settings.json, but you have this set parameters file, and you can inject all the secrets into that set parameters file. It looks something like this, really. So if you actually download the artifact that's deploying, you'll see the set parameters file in there, and it's sort of got this format, maybe additional mentions of what the default web. So here, for example, it's got the IIS web application name. Oh, sorry. Just trying to show at the bottom. I'm trying to just show everything at once. So in the screenshot below, you can see the last bottom parts of the script here. It's manipulating this XML that would be in the artifact, and it will look something like this. And it will inject all the values into this XML, and then as MS Deploy does its deployment, these will get pushed into the configs, such as the web config, the image processor config. And the way it knows how to map all of it is that there will be like a parameters.xml file. And in this parameters.xml file, it will have the actual name of the secret and where it is in the config, and that's how it maps out. So this is for the web config, for example. And further down, have an example for image processor. So you might have a cache config that goes to Azure Blob Storage, and that's the sort of the XML path that it will inject that value in the web config during deployment. And that's essentially process here is that you would deploy that out, and then your secrets get injected as you're releasing. That way, the artifact that comes from the pipeline has no secrets in it, and as it's being deployed out, it's at this phase where the secrets have been injected, and they're not really accessible at that stage after the deployment is complete. We also have Moriyama config builders or config builders. We have our own sort of implementation on it. Microsoft has released its own sort of functionality built into Visual Studio. So in Visual Studio, even with .NET Framework, you can right-click on a project and manage user secrets, and that uses config builders in the background. But we also, have our own implementation of it, which you can download on NuGet, and it's open source on GitHub. And it uses that set parameters file with secrets, but for local development, so you can do this locally. Because the thing that we want to avoid here is when you're working locally, you don't want all your secrets to be in the web config. And let's say you add a rewrite rule or something in your web config to add a redirect, and when you do your commit, you accidentally commit all your secrets to source control. So we use config builds to get around that. So let's sort of see how this works. So so if I have a look at this application, we've got the Moriyama website, but obviously the secrets are not set, so it's going to give us an error. And you can sort of see this in Visual Studio here, where we have no value set in our web.config, so the connection strings are not set, and various other things are not set. And how do we get around that? So here we have the web root, and we have our own command line tool at Moriyama called Moriyama DevOps. I'm going to do what is called the post build command, and that's going to go off to Key Vault, grab our set parameters file with our secrets in it, and put the file on disk. And then when I reload the page, it's going to use config builders in the background to load the Moriyama website. And hoping, yeah, there we go. The Moriyama website now available. And Umbraco should be working in the back. We do like a good sort of long loading time, and there's Umbraco in the background. And so what this allows is to just basically work, maintain not having secrets in the repo, but have it working for local development. So we sort of look at that diagram again. What it's done is it's gone from Key Vault, pulled down the secrets, put it into a set parameters file, and then config builder has injected it into the web config without actually putting any sort of values in as text. You can see at the top here we've got our Moriyama config builders here, and it's enabled true, and it's pulling our secrets for the preview environment. Yeah, so and that allows the developer to just work on their work and things without secrets in the repo. So there's also what we have at Moriyama is the possibility to create your own custom DevOps task. So when you're making a release pipeline, you have the deploy Azure App Service tasks deployed to Azure App Service, but you also can have your own custom ones. So here we've got Moriyama DevOps, which is basically a task in Azure DevOps, but where it has our command line tool that I just showed you in the background, working in the background. And what this sort of allows you to do is have a clean, standardized approach to inject secrets into your configuration files during deployment. It's doing pretty much the same thing as the PowerShell approach, but you don't have to fiddle around with PowerShell scripts. It's just sort of built into a package here, like a task. So you don't really have to worry about messing up that PowerShell script. But what it also allows you to do is, so you notice these other tasks below. So we have our post-production task, and for example, this one is rebuild and examine, and republishing the XML from Umbraco. So what will happen is the Moriyama DevOps task here will run. It will inject the secrets. Then Azure App Service will kick in and deploy the application with our secrets contained. And then this following task will run afterwards and do all our routine checks, making sure examine is built, making sure that the sites are republished, and maybe do a crawl of the site as well to check all the pages are loading. And you can just sort of just do that all contained within a task. Our last strategy that I'll mention, which I saw one of our clients using, was the Azure App Config. Cool thing about Azure App Config is that it allows you to basically have your secrets in Key Vault as always, and have this service in front called Azure App Config, which acts as an endpoint. And in your app settings.json, you basically just all you have is an endpoint to that service. And what that will do is, even for local development as well, if you're logged in with your Microsoft account and you have access to the endpoint and access to the Key Vault, I believe, you can, as the application is running, it can pull down the Azure secrets, and the application that you're running, the web application, will communicate with Azure App Config to grab those secrets, and you can work on it locally. This also works in the production environment as well. So in the production environment, you could just have this as your app settings. And I forgot to add like a symbol here for a VM. So we have a client that has a web app and a VM, and they are considering moving to app service, but at the moment they're still on VMs. And so what this allows you to do is basically have the same app settings JSON on both environments, and they can both access the credentials they need. We've got these slides will be handed out, and you can sort of read more about this with the links that I have set here. And that's it. So let us help you. So whether you're a business or an agency maintaining sites with .NET, Moriyama is here to help and support you on your DevOps journey. Get in touch with us via our contact form. If you want advice, or want us to have a look at your sort of DevOps process and give advice and things, or if you want us just to do the whole thing, contact us. And there's a QR code to the contact us page as well. And I hear Warren's joining as well. Our upcoming webinar is cost reduction ideas for Azure. So we'll be looking at cost reduction ideas that you could do for your Azure subscription. We'll be aiming to do this on the 26th of August at 11 a.m. And here's like a link to the webinar to sign up. Don't know if Warren wants to touch more on the webinar or.
Well, I think those are the details for our next webinar, but also we're open to suggestions if particularly in this DevOps space when it's so big. We've just looked at a little bit, focused on an area with secrets and deployment today. And even when we get into the secrets, there's so many strategies, there's so many approaches, there's a lot of information there. So maybe there are some other areas that people would like us to present. So you can send those, if you've got things you'd like us to talk to, just write to us at contact@moriyama.co.uk, and we'll try and add that to the list. Thanks, Matt. So I think we're moving on to questions next, aren't we? We have quite a few.
I was doing the talk and I just saw the questions whizzing by, and I answered maybe a few of them as I was waiting for things to load. But
all right, I'll start with a question / observation around the deployment slots. And we've used the slot, so we've swapped from our pre-prod slot to a production slot, and we're happy with the website. And a couple of days later, client reports something, and there's potentially an issue that's now been discovered with that deployment. Can we swap back?
Yes. So in the slot swap demo that we gave, can easily just swap them back. So we have the hello from Key Vault, that was the previous release, and from key vault to prod in the new release. And we can just go back to deployment slots, swap. It's going to take a moment to load, and then say pre-prod from production and just swap it back. Obviously, it's going to take a moment to swap the files again, but you will basically have reverted your release back if for whatever reason when you deployed it you realize, oh I missed this, I didn't check this. Yeah, that's totally possible.
Excellent, thanks. Let's have a look at up and down the questions. I'll scroll up and see what we've got. So Gareth asked, can you set up? Gareth asked, can
you set the swap to be done by? Of course, yes. So yeah, you can have a DevOps task to just swap the slot as you're doing the release. We usually call it the promote task as well. So you'll deploy to pre-prod, pre-prod in this case, and maybe you might have some tasks that do all the testing for you, such as warming up the site, checking if things are returning 200 response, and if they don't, error in the release pipeline. And then you might have a promote task on the end of that to do the slot swap for you without having to go, like I did, into the portal and do it manually. So yeah, that is totally possible.
Okay, great. Next one from Nick. Have you had issues with Examine in this scenario, such as the indexes getting locked, or Examine managed finding itself in the shutdown?
Not really, no. I mean, we've been doing it for maybe a few years now, and we've just always been swapping without any issues really. You basically, once you've deployed the pre-prod, deployed to pre-prod, you go into Examine and it can check that it's built all the Examine indexes on that slot, and then when you swap it, the indexes go along with it.
Okay. I'll scroll down, see the next one. Okay, so now I think we're into the secret side of things, and this was before the question came in before we got up to a couple of the strategies later on. But the question was, if you were using these approaches for secrets, how do you work locally? And this was the
I don't know at what point they mentioned that during the talk, but we did go over using secrets locally, whether using config builders or Microsoft's new approach to have which is also config builders but built into Visual Studio. You can easily work locally if your secrets are in Key Vault. It depends on the format as well. If you're doing the Azure App setting approach where you have all the Key Vault, all the secrets individually set, and those go to individual app settings in your web app with the Key Vault reference link, then yeah, that won't be easy to use locally. But then you can store a whole set parameters file into Key Vault as well. There's no actual character limit, so you can actually in Key Vault take this whole XML file, copy and paste it into Key Vault, and it'll store the whole thing. It might store it in like a single line, but our config builder does that. So config builder, the Moriyama config builder that we have that I showed, is basically just downloading this whole XML file from Key Vault.
Okay. Excellent. Scrolling down. Could you please show your deployments?
I did want to. The only problem, NoHack, is that we have. I need to find like an example that doesn't have a client name in it. I mean the actual deployment that we did for the Umbraco 10 site was very basic. So let me just edit.
Might mark this one as a potential candidate for a future webinar, because we didn't focus on the builds so much today.
Here's the Umbraco 10 deployment that we did for the Azure Web App. So it's just basically we can just deploy with just the Azure App Service deployment task, and then the secrets are already on the web app, so they already pull them up.
Might be nice. Might be nice in the future to maybe do a webinar where we just start without a pipeline and build the pipeline in the webinar. That might be a nice one. Let's think about that. Scrolling down, we answered the next one during the talk, or we gave our opinion. But Nick made we was right. We don't really use the variables in Azure DevOps. I think we did in the past, because we moved on to other approaches. And Nick has mentioned that you can keep your variables tidy with variable groups.
Yeah, but you have to also create those groups, and I didn't see like an easy way of doing that programmatically or within the, because like for example with the XML stuff here, I can easily just copy and paste and build up my XML file in VS Code, whereas in DevOps I have to either figure out how to do it via an API or have to click through loads of menus to get what I want. So we go with this approach a lot cleaner, and also it works for local dev as well. So we're sort of doing two things at once here. But there's so many approaches to DevOps, and everybody has their preferences on things. So I'm not advocating that this one is better than the other, but it's just basically my experience and how I feel about it, and what frustrates me or what doesn't frustrate me.
Another question from Nick. Do you have any tips?
I think that might be another talk potentially. I need to read up on it a bit more.
Okay. Yeah, I think.
But that's something that we can definitely tap into and have a whole talk about.
Okay. All right. A new question here. So when we talked about swapping, and we talked about swapping back, wouldn't swapping back depend on what was in the previous release? For example, if a release had migration in it, that won't swap back because the database can't be reversed. Is it similar for using schema?
So we have a strategy that we do when we think about these sort of things, whether it's a usync migration or a database upgrade. So if it's a Umbraco upgrade, what we will do is we will have pre-prod using the original production database. There's also a content freeze in place. So we've already told the client that you can't write any content during this period. And so we'll deploy our release to pre-production with the production database. But the production slot will be using a copy of production. So in Azure, you can very easily just click the copy button for your existing database and create a copy of it. And then on the actual production web app, change the connection string to use that new copy. And it will just, obviously it's the same database, so it will just operate like nothing's gone wrong, basically, like nothing's happened. And then on that pre-prod slot, we can do all of our upgrades, all of our very dangerous sort of database-focused work, verify it all works on pre-prod. If it doesn't, then, production is running on another copy, and we can tell the client, oh, it's failed, but we've still got the website available. And then we can do a point-in-time restore on the production database to actually, no, we wouldn't need to do it. Sorry, ignore that. And we can then try again, maybe make a copy of the copy to then try and rerun the deployment again, and try and do that that upgrade again. But ideally, you get it done, you get it perfect on the first try. That way, you maintain all that history of the original database, because Azure stores all these metrics about a specific database and its performance metrics and things. And so when you copy and when you make a copy, you're making a new database in Azure, and so all that history is gone. But in this case, you'll get it right first time, and then when you swap, the actual correct connection string with the upgraded database will be swapped in, and then the copy website with the copy will be swapped back. And then if the client goes, oh, there's something wrong with Umbraco now, I can't write my content, this upgrade's done something horrible, we can still swap the slots back. But obviously it does mean that the content does go back a bit because obviously the upgrades failed. But it allows when we swap the slots, it's still a valid rollback strategy. There might be better ways of doing it, but that's currently how we go about it.
Okay. Thanks, Matt. Which seems we'll have a couple of new. Let's see.
Everything's always perfect on my first try.
From Nick, talking of release tasks, have you set up a release that is a manual step as part of it? It's a question from Nick. Talking of release tasks, have you set up a release that has a manual step as part of it?
A manual step as part. So what do you? Sorry, can you? I mean, oh, so like that I have to do manually. I mean, usually what I find is the team finds it more comfortable, to authorize the release, etc. You can do that in DevOps where, for example, the promote task needs someone, higher up to authorize it, and you can put, I think they're called gates on the task. So you would have your deployment, which will go to pre-prod, and then you have your promote task to do the swap, and on that promote, you'll have a gate that will say only Warren can approve this, and no one else can, and you can sort of gate it that way. Or if you're thinking, if I understand your question correctly, manual step, that if you want to do something manually, you can, just deploy to pre-prod and then, for example, manually swap the slots like I do. I think a lot of us at the Moriyama team kind of do that because we feel comfortable doing it that way. We can actually look at the web ourselves, and we're already in Azure looking at it, and so we just click the button and do it. Most of us are all very familiar with Azure and use it on a day-to-day basis. But I understand some teams may not and may want to just have the button. So in Azure Release Pipelines, you have manual steps in it, but I couldn't find a way to have an automated bit followed by a manual step followed by more automation. So I was wondering if you've done that. I think the gate bit's still just trying to reduce people going to Azure. I mean, so let me see. So I think I'll just have to show this one. You can, on the pipeline here, when the artifact's available, you can tick this to say create a release every time the build is available, and on this one, keep that ticked. So then when the build is complete, it will create a new release, and then this will detect that the new release is there and trigger a build, and then you can have your tasks here to deploy to the app service, and then subsequent tasks afterwards to do all your checking, and then if any of these tasks fail, then Azure DevOps will detect that and not continue on. And at the very end, you could have the promote task at the very bottom here. You could add an extra task to promote within the same step. So you could achieve that where it just does all the steps, and then as long as it fails and causes the pipeline to fail, then it won't do the promote bit. But I like having the manual button to do a promote task. It just sort of gives you more control, and just allows you to review everything and then just say, okay, I'm happy, promote, and then you've manually made the decision to promote. I hope that's answered your question.
All right, thanks, Matt. So a reminder to everyone that there's a bit.ly URL down there if you want to start registering for our next webinar. Visit our website, write to us at contact@Moriyama if you want us to talk about anything in particular.
Check out, check out my blog, mu7.dev. Our Moriyama YouTube channel is a QR code to that, and the QR code to my blog, and a QR code to my Twitter account if you want to follow me on Twitter. My LinkedIn and Twitter use the same alias as well. The slides will be available, and this webinar will be on
The-
YouTube, and I'll post that on Twitter and LinkedIn when it's available.
Yeah, exactly. Good. All right. Well, thanks everyone. We'll wrap it up here, and hopefully we'll
Thanks,
see
everyone.
you again.
Have a
next
lovely
time.
day. Bye.
Yeah. Bye now.